Hi, so before we begin this video, I just need to say that this is a very out there speculation video where I will argue that this picture could be this boss, and I'll try to give a bit of the abstract theoretical reasoning why this may be the case, but don't worry, I am not in fact delusional. Do I think that this is gonna happen? Probably not. But do I think that it will be nice and fun to talk about? Absolutely. So if you're on board with that, then continue watching. Hey, this is Faye, and today it's about to get really nerdy in here, so I'm gonna put on my smarticles, and then if you want to leave, then now is a really good time to do so, okay? Okay. Alright, so the rest of you who stuck around, strap yourselves in. Because this thing came up in Sync's Discord and he was asking our opinion on these two pictures. And seeing these two pictures side by side made something click for me. Yoshi P has said that there is a hint in the art, like there usually is, and aside of the obvious Hydaelyn on top, Zodiac on the bottom, the moon kind of binding one to the other, the planet in the middle of them, and maybe Hydaelyn is holding the twin moons in her other hand, I don't know. I was struck by something else entirely, and my mind works in weird ways, so in order to get there, I'll need to explain how I got there, and this is a loopy theory at best, and it relies on a little bit of fringe knowledge, so we're in for a bit of a trip here. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Jungian psychology, or maybe even better, the religious mysticism that it builds upon, namely the Gnosticism. I am not actually talking about the game before the very end. It will seem awfully familiar, because Japan is so on board with this branch of Christianity and psychology, because it shares a lot of similar ideas with Buddhism, so it seems very right for them. And a lot of stories and games have been inspired by this. And Final Fantasy especially have based some of their tropes on Gnostic ideas. And basically, whenever you have a story where there is a creating deity that is not quite as divine as they purport to be, or that they are set up to be in the start of the story, but then later you find out that you can disagree with the deity, or you can see where it's flawed, or where it's petty, or where it's less than us, so maybe you can even kill it, then that's building on Gnosticism. I am a far cry from an expert in the field of Gnosticism, but I do know a little bit about how it inspired the work of Gustav Jung, one of the founding fathers of psychology, amongst many other things, and by far the most abstract one of these fathers. One of his key concepts is that every person is in contact with the collective unconscious that gives us information about the world, in that it draws on the experience of everybody else in the world, all of the people that have come before us, all of the things that they've said or done about the world. It is how we make and understand tropes, and in some branches, how we feel that we may know something about some people or can read something about their past or present or even future without actually having experienced it ourselves. The collective unconscious works with archetypes, and some of these most commonly used ones are the Great Mother, the tyrannical father, the wise old man, the shadow, the tower, water, and the tree of life. Other great ones are the wanderer, the trickster, the flood, and the witch. If anyone has read Joseph Campbell's Hero with 1,000 Faces, this will all sound very familiar. Because these archetypes permeate our thoughts and dreams, and because we see them in our everyday lives and we rely on them to navigate, they help us make fast decisions about people and scenarios without knowing quite how we know that we can trust this person or why we distrust this person. We can explain it, of course, if we're asked to, but since it is an unconscious process, it is almost like background magic of the brain. Our déjà vu are also expected to come from such processes too. Now, one key feature of all of this whole collective unconscious is the anima and the animus, the anthropomorphic female and male parts of everything. Jung posited that every male has a female side inside of them, and that this is their anima, and that every female has a male side inside of them, and that this is the animus. These can be more or less well developed and be more or less conscious to your mind, and issues will arise when they're not. In a story setting, these are the male and female aspects of people, situations, objects, stories, and they are not directly associated with your mother, sister, father, brother, uncle, aunt, whatever, but all of these people may of course inform how these two entities look inside of your mind, of course. Everything and everybody has a male and a female part to them, and they are the two main archetypes of the unconscious mind, with shadow serving a smaller but vital role to the mind. The shadow is the part of us that we don't wish to identify with. It's the parts that has all the nasty thoughts and drives. It's the parts that aren't always righteous and good, but can be selfish and destructive and petty and prideful and rageful and vengeful. All of those good emotions that we'd rather not admit that we have. We all have a shadow to confront and to reassimilate with, to take back all of those nasty thoughts that are ours, but that we don't want to or don't agree with. Because if we don't, if we just split them away from us, then they'll just grow and fester in the dark, and they'll try to usurp us and trip up our plans. In order to deal with the anima or the animus, you must assimilate or find peace with or deal with the shadow. The more it's understood and the more it's integrated, the better you can see and reach the anima and the animus. There is this great quote where Jung explains that the encounter with the shadow is the apprentice piece in the individual's development. That with the anima is the masterpiece. Now, anima itself comes from Latin and it's associated with breath, soul, spirit, or vital force. Animus is conversely associated with rational soul, life, mind, mental power, courage, or desire, and back in the 19th century it was associated with temper, used in a hostile way. Jung describes that each of these two have 4 levels, the anima and the animus having 4 archetypes that it develops through. And this is cool and all, but we're already really strapped for time, so I will just leave these on the screen and then I will apply them later on. Both the anima and the animus, the shadow and the self, have a light and a dark aspect to them. All of these serve a purpose, but if they're left unattended, then they will take over one way or another. The anima will possess you and surround you by inferior people, so that you need not concern yourself with thinking too hard or challenge your hold over you. The animus will try to downright usurp the self because it's not satisfied with just being part of you, it wants to be in control. It wants to be the hero. This is where a well-developed shadow may actually come and save you, because you need those dark and determined and sometimes underhanded driving forces inside of you. Does any of this sound familiar or foreboding, or are you falling asleep yet? The Asians are great shadows, and they're even referred to as shadowless, which we all know from literature and folklore that a shadow can't have a shadow of its own. So being a shadowless essentially is a very clever way of calling it a shadow. And they do serve the role of a shadow, having all of the destructive and bad and selfish and hopeless and angry and not nice feelings and emotions that we'd rather not admit that we have. It is also when we find sympathy for the shadow and love those qualities a little bit and understand and appreciate them that we find that they become part of us, and that they will come to our rescue when we need them, like a certain Asian did when we were struggling and were literally overpowered by the until now clearest animus representation in the game, Elidibus, who was representing Zodiac. Zodiac does seem to be our overarching animus representation, though the game has had other ones, such as Gaius, who started out as a man of mere physical power and then transcended to a man of action, literally having Shadowhunter as his epithet, slipping into a more orator role and likely will end up as a spiritual leader of sorts. Minifelia and Hydaelyn are the clearest overarching anima representation in the game. In many ways, Minifelia goes through the 4 stages of the anima archetype, of the nurturing and gathering person, then slipping into a more or less successful portrayal of a self-reliant woman who acts with intelligence and insightfulness, but is also portrayed in a slightly less virtuous manner, and then she slips into a more esoteric savior figure to transcend into wisdom and insight, literally becoming wisdom and insight in the mind of Rhyme. As mentioned before, both the anima, the animus, the shadow and the self, the hero, has a light and a dark side to them. And here we can think about the astral and umbral parts, as well as the themes of light and darkness and yin and yang. All that just to say that while I don't know if Square is gonna go all the way, they absolutely could make the boss anima into this picture, with Hydaelyn on the top and Zodiac on the bottom. Anima on the top and animus on the bottom. Or they could in theory go all in and make this only anima, but just make it the light side, the constrained and more docile side on the top, and the more active, the shadow side, the aggressive, the dark side on the bottom. It would be a really ballsy move to make this about Hydaelyn. I absolutely agree, because up until now she has been our great mother archetype. But if we are to have a showdown with Zodiac, then we will have to balance out the dynamic powers that are in play, which would entail some sort of showdown with Hydaelyn. And in a way, the showdown between the Great Mother and the tyrannical father is literally what the anima-animus conflict that Jung describes is mainly about. We also have done some balancing acts like this before, like how in the Eden raids we had a showdown with Daddy Issues the Fight, as well as the Tree of Life mother-sister-lover figure Gaia. Alright, so it is early in the morning and I haven't had my coffee yet. But I hope that some of this made any kind of sense. And in a way, likely you've had a bit of the same idea, because in theory, this is all based on the collective unconscious, meaning that everything in this theory and everything in the story of Final Fantasy should just seem that little bit familiar, so that it is just sufficiently predictable to not startle you and just sufficiently surprising to be entertaining. I am, of course, not an expert on any of this, and this needs to be said, and I can totally have gotten things wrong or the theories wrong, but these were just some of the musings that struck me when I saw these pictures brought up side by side, and I figured I would throw in my 2 cents in a format that is more likely to be digested than a pages-long post in a Discord. If you stuck out until this point, I am madly impressed, like mad geek points to you. But thank you so much for watching. Take care and have a really wonderful day. Bye. Oh, and before you leave, here's a little thought for you. So, remember how we talked about the shadow and how it represented some of the not nice thoughts and feelings like anger or vengefulness or resentment, or some of the things that we don't necessarily want to identify ourselves with? And how that shadow sometimes pop up to protect us? Like how our anger is sometimes the watchdog that is barking because somebody is actually stepping over our boundaries? Well, maybe you should take today to figure out who is your inner Emmett. When is he there to take care of you? Instead of hating him for being there, because he's your shadow, he's part of you, he's sure some of the less nice parts of you that you wish you didn't have, but they're usually there for a reason. They usually want to be heard. And I'm pretty sure that there's been times where he's protected you too. So, give a little love to your inner shadow. It's there to protect you. And we all have one. And that's okay. Anyways, have a wonderful day and take care of yourself. Bye.